Hello, how are you, friends? Welcome to a new story, which is a terrifying story. Take your places and turn off the lights our story tells.
In one of the Tunisian cities, a widowed woman lived with her young son in a house in a popular neighborhood. This woman and her son were suffering from calamities because of this house and what they saw and what they heard inside it. They used to hear terrible screams at night and sometimes sounds like barking or howling animals, in addition to the dark imaginations that they had. They see her everywhere in the house, and their terrifying steps in the silence of the late night. The woman and her son tried to live with this situation due to their weak resourcefulness and difficult financial circumstances. They were not able to leave the house and rent a new house after her husband, the breadwinner of the family, died. The only thing, so they tried to ignore everything that was happening in their house and coexist with these visitors, trying to convince themselves that they were just peaceful visitors. Over time, the matter began to get worse little by little, as the mother began to lose many of the household items, such as clothes, kitchen utensils, and even the little money they had with them. And sometimes she would find strands of hair, of the black hair inside the food immediately after it was prepared. In addition to that, she was not comfortable even in her sleep, as she felt someone sharing her bed when sleeping, and she felt light touches on her body that made her wake up terrified every night, searching around the room, but she could not find anyone else, for she was afraid, even from sleep, but there was no way she could do it. Her greatest concern was for her only son, as she had no one else after the death of her husband. One day, her son entered his room to find a black cat sitting on his bed, staring at him strangely. He became upset, shouted at him, and hit him. The cat quickly left the room, and the child closed the door behind him. Then he returned to his bed and lay down for a while until he fell into a deep sleep, dreaming that he was wandering around their house, searching for his mother from one room to another. A tall, terrifying-looking black shadow intercepted him, saying, "Why did you hurt me when I was sleeping? What did I do to you that made you hit me?" Then the boy remembered that black cat and said to that thing while trembling, "Did that same black cat die?" He said to him, "It doesn't matter who I am. I have come to hit you like you hit me." Then the child was shocked and tried to escape. He was running around the house calling for his mother, but that thing was behind him wherever he went until it surrounded him in the corner of the room and slapped him in the face until he broke his tooth. At that moment, he woke up terrified of that nightmare, but they were surprised that one of his teeth was actually broken. He shouted and called out to his mother, crying, "Mother, mother." She came to him terrified. "In the name of God, in the name of God, what's wrong with you, my son? What happened to you?" So he told her the whole story. She was shocked by that, but she tried to calm the boy down and stayed awake beside him until the morning to take her child to her neighbor's house. To stay with her, she was fed up and decided to ask for help from someone. So she went to one of the mosques to ask about a kaka. Perhaps he could help her. One of them directed her to one of the best kaka in the area, called Sheikh Al-Baghdadi, so she waited until he left the mosque and went to him saying, "Sheikh, oh Sheikh, I am ashamed. Please ask God to help me, for by God it is me and my son. We live in indescribable horror and psychological torment." He replied to her, calm down, my daughter, and tell me about your story and your topic, and God willing, I will do what I can to help you." The woman told him everything that was happening in her house and what they saw and heard inside it. She even told him about the dream that her son had seen and what happened after it. So he said to her, "Okay, I understood the topic. Go back to your house now and continue your prayers on time. You have read as much of the Quran as you can today, and tomorrow, God willing, I will come to the house and perform ruqya for you and your son to fortify and protect the house from the harm of the devils." So she went to her house and did what the sheikh told her to do, but when she started to pray, she felt something strange in the room. But she tried to ignore that to finish her prayer. Then she started reciting the Quran, only to hear directly her son's screams in the other room. She quickly went to him and found him shocked and crying to tell her, "They were here and they looked very scary, mother." Laura was foaming, dragging me down. Then she took him and went to her neighbor's house for them to sleep, and she spent the night there.
And in the next day, Sheikh Al-Baghdadi came with his friend Sheikh Al-Jaridi, and the woman welcomed them and received them inside. As soon as they entered, they had a strange feeling about that house, so he asked the woman to take her son and wait outside until they finished their work. The woman and her son came out, and the two sheikhs toured the rooms of the house. Then they put their things down and began reciting the Quran and supplications. While they were reciting, strange events began, beginning with a sudden power outage, but that did not prevent them from continuing to recite until they heard a very strong sound of footsteps shaking the walls of the house, followed by the sound of strange whispers in the corners of the room. Applause. Then the two sheikhs felt tense, but they remained steadfast and continued their work until the electricity returned and the sound stopped. However, they were astonished by the footprints on the walls and ceiling of the room. They looked at each other with astonishment and concern, so they decided to stop there. They carried their belongings and left the house, heading to the woman and her son. Sheikh Al-Baghdadi said to her, "Listen, my daughter, we have treated you. Many people have lived before and lived in several places for many years, but we did not see anything like a house. You have to leave this house and stay with your son in your neighbor's house for a few days until we see what we can do, and we will return tomorrow to complete what we started." Then she took her son directly and went to her neighbor's house to spend the night with her. The next day came, and the two sheikhs came and continued their work for several consecutive days. But the condition of that house never improved, and the two sheikhs returned to their homes upset every time. They did not feel that the conditions of that house were beginning to change, so the jinn that lived in it was very strong. But one night, while Sheikh Al-Baghdadi, sleeping in his bed, dreamed that he was walking inside a narrow basement like a grave, and his entrance was under that house that people went to every day. He was dreaming of those voices whispering in applause his ear until he woke up terrified with the sound of the dawn call to prayer, "God is great." So he sat for a while thinking about what he saw, but he did not find any explanation for that, so he recovered from Satan. He carried himself to the mosque, and after the prayer ended, he decided to tell his friend Sheikh Al-Jaridi about what he saw in his dream. While he was telling him about it, he noticed that his facial features had changed. He asked him, "What's wrong with you, my friend? Is there something strange in my words?" The sheikh replied, "I saw a dream with all its details 2 days ago." Here the sheikh was shocked. Al-Baghdadi decided to go to the owner of the house to ask her if she knew about the existence of that basement, or if she knew anything about it. Immediately upon their arrival there, Sheikh Al-Baghdadi asked her, "Is there a basement or a passage under your house or anything like that?" Then the woman responded in surprise, "Yes, there is a basement under one of the rooms. But how did you know about him? No one knows about him. There is something different between me and my deceased husband. I also found my son opening the door to that basement one day, but I prevented him and have locked the door tightly since that time." The sheikh interrupted her. "Can you show me the location of that basement? We suspect that it is the reason for what is happening in your house." The woman took him inside to show them the door to that basement directly, so he decided. The two sheikhs broke the lock and opened it and tried to enter it to inspect the story of their vision and what was the secret behind it. So they prepared themselves and recited the verses of fortification and some supplications to protect it from the evil of the devils and their plots. Then they put their trust in God and descended inside it. They noticed the depth and narrowness of that basement, just as it was in the dream they had. So he started sprinkling water. Al-Marki repeatedly sought refuge in God, feeling the ribosome directly, thinking that it was an exit close to that woman's house. As soon as they left, they found themselves in a very strange place, and its appearance was completely different from the human world. He walked a few steps, then they stopped, and Sheikh Al-Baghdadi said to his companion, "Do you know where we are, my friend?" So the sheikh answered him, "Al-Jaridi is confused. Have we entered their world? Have we opened the gate of error? What should we do now? Should we go back to where we came?" He begins to hear the sound of strange singing and psalms mixed with frightening screams as factors. He headed toward the source of that sound with light steps, and the more they walked, the more they heard those sounds stronger than before, as if they were attracting them to it, until the place became strangely quiet when all those sounds stopped, and an unbelievable shock and horror appeared before them in a moment, as strange-looking naked people gathered around them, and their features were frightening and disgusting at that time. The feet of the two sheikhs began to tremble from the horror of that scene, and astonishment and terror spread through their souls as they knew that those around them were clans of jinn. Then these terrifying-looking beings approached, their size larger than the rest, and their features struck them with extreme panic. He stood before them, saying, "What brings you here so that you cannot speak a single word?" He said to them, "Satan, you must stop reciting the Quran in that house and leave it without returning if you want to save your lives." Sheikh Al-Baghdadi restrained himself and replied, saying, "We only wanted to help that woman and her child." He replied, laughing, "You have nothing to do with that family, so let us revolt with it, because the widow's son opened the basement, through which you entered our underworld and harmed our children from the jinn. Now get out of my face, and I will return to you from where you came, and do not look back and do not utter another word." The two sheikhs rushed to leave immediately without thinking about looking behind them or uttering a single word until he reached the place from which he entered to open for them. A door out of nowhere, so they rushed towards it, to find themselves inside that narrow basement, smiling at each other after their escape from that place and its evil. Then Sheikh Al-Baghdadi continued walking with his companion behind him, and after a few meters, Sheikh Al-Jaridi screamed loudly, and Sheikh Al-Baghdadi turned behind him in horror. But he did not find his companion, and no trace of him was found yet. He was walking behind him, and here he felt anxious and extremely afraid, and he began calling for his companion and searching for him everywhere inside that cursed basement. But without seriousness, he decided to leave that place and ask people for help. So he started running in that tunnel until he came out of that basement. So he hurried to ask for help from the people, the area who they gathered around him while he told them the details of everything that had happened. Dozens of them headed into that tunnel, searching for days for the missing sheikh, but they found no trace of him. After that incident, Sheikh Al-Baghdadi entered a state of depression due to his grief for his companion and his shock at what he saw and heard. Sheikh Al-Jaridi screamed uncontrollably. What I heard, he decided not to leave his house and no longer opened his door to anyone because he blamed himself and blamed it for losing his best friend, because whenever he remembered that he was the one who asked him to come with him, his tears would hardly dry from crying. After about a week, the people missed Sheikh Al-Baghdadi, so they headed towards his house trying to knock on the door, but no benefit, no sound or movement was heard from inside the house, so they decided to break down the door because of their concern for the sheikh. As soon as they entered, they were shocked by the horror of the horrific sight. They saw the sheikh dead in an ugly way, as insects were covering his face, in addition to his hands, which were removed from his body. The incident aroused terror and sympathy among the people of the area, so they decided to demolish it. The house and the basement underneath it, and a mosque was built in its place, and it was named the Baghdad Mosque after the late sheikh. The mosque still exists to this day in the Mohammedia area in Tunis. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.